All right. I'm going to call this meeting of the Dunn County Facilities Committee to order. Today is Wednesday, April 30th at 6 p.m. and we're in room 60 in the Dunn County Government Center. All right, so call of the roll. We are all present. Thank you all for adjusting times and schedules. So I would entertain a motion to approve the previous meeting minutes from March 26th. So that was Supervisor Prochnow. For a second. Okay. Supervisor Lyon. So does anyone have any discussion concerning the minutes? Thank you, Supervisor Bjork, for running the meeting. Running the meeting in March. Oh. All right, so we'll call the question to approve the previous meeting minutes from March 26th. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Same sign? All right, so the motion passes unanimously. So no public comment? No one received any? Okay, so we'll move on to 5. Items placed at the request of the chair, which there is none this month. So we move on to 6A, which is the Fair Board report. Deb?
Okay, good evening. So we do have our theme selected. I don't think I mentioned it last time. We had selected it before because we were doing that contest. So anyway, it's Stars, Stripes, and Summer Nights, and this is what it looks like. So if you haven't been on the website to see it, so that's the design. Whoops, as I take the microphone out. But so we have that selected. We are now listed as a partner on Travel Wisconsin's website for tourism. So hopefully that'll drive some attendees or drive some information or drive people to come to our website to see what's going on. I'm continuing to work on getting judges. I need a dog judge. So if anybody knows anybody that likes to judge dogs or is certified to judge dogs, let me know. I've already contacted, I had 2 of them lined up already last September, and then one of them now backed out. And so I've contacted 13 people. I'm on my 14th email went out today to try to get one. So dog judges that are they're sometimes hard to find, and we've kind of have a niche market here because our person that runs our dog program is so well known all over the state, Sandy Miller, and she judges so many shows and participates in so many shows that 4 of those judges told me I won't come and judge because I know Sandy and I know the caliber of what she does, and I'm nervous to judge any of her events. So I'm like, and that's a good thing for Sandy, but it's a bad thing for us. So kudos to Sandy. I mean, she's been doing this for years and has such a good program going that we're proud to have her in Dunn County, and we should be proud of her accomplishments. So anyway, but vendor contracts are coming in slow, which is kind of usual. They really start picking up after the 1st of May where we start getting those in. I've got a lot of requests from food vendors that want to come here, and I've been screening those and making sure that we don't get a lot of duplicates because then nobody can make any money. So that's what I'm dealing with right now. I got a couple of them that are willing to change their menu, so I'm waiting for menus. And I have to watch how many we get because we don't have enough power, right, Scott? And stuff. And you probably all heard about the tragic plane crash in Illinois. Mm-hmm. And of course, Courtney that was killed in the plane crash is our new horse superintendent. So the good thing is that she was very well organized and had a lot of things in place to go. And I know Scott's been communicating with her as far as things at the horse barn that she had sent an email to him. And you're already working on, I'm sure you're going to get to that in your report, so I'm not going to run on your parade, but she is very well organized. But now we have a couple other leaders that have kind of stepped forward and said they would help out this year because, I mean, that was a terrible tragedy and I believe both Courtney and Ramey were the general leaders for the Willing Workers 4-H Club too. So it's like a double whammy. whammy there. So have a hard time wrapping my head around this one. So, anyway, but I guess that's all I have unless somebody has questions.
I,
Supervisor Lyon.
sorry about that. How many counties still do a county fair in Wisconsin? Do you know?
There's 75 county or 75 county and district state aided fairs. There are a
Wow.
couple counties that actually have 2 fairs.
I was gonna say.
Yep. Yep. So there's still
Okay.
75.
But there are some counties that don't have a county fair.
Pepin County is probably the only one, and they have now joined with Buffalo County.
Oh,
So Buffalo County Fair in affiliation with Pepin County Fair, because after the Arkansas school where they held their
Oh.
fair down there was sold, they
Mhm.
lost all of their
Yeah,
the
lost their-
grounds and stuff that they use. So
Sure.
it was a small fair.
Mhm.
So those kids went to Buffalo County. Some came to Dunn, are showing in Dunn County
Mhm.
because they're right on the county line with us. So
Cool.
and belong to the maybe go to school in ours, and we can also accept Rand FFA kids in our program or in our group. So yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Any other questions? Thank you, Deb.
Yep, you're welcome.
So then we'll move on to 6B, which is the Facilities and Parks report, which you submitted. Does anyone have any questions or do you have anything to add?
Just a couple of things to add. We have had some issues with beavers in Monoman Park. They blocked up one of the culvert down there. So we had water running across the walking trail at the bottom of the hill. We had our highway department go down there with a mini backhoe and dug that out of there. And now looking forward into seeing if we can get someone to trap the beaver out of there to take care of the nuisance. It's becoming a problem now. Tomorrow, we're having our electronics collection event for all of Dunn County. Got everything planned for that. It'll be noon to 6 at the small animal barn out at the rec park. Have everything in place for a traffic plan, coordinated with blocking off streets so that we don't get traffic backed up on any of the city streets. They'll be backed up in the rec park if it does back up. Got plenty of people there to work it, so it should go smooth, I'm hoping. And today we got the chiller started up at the Judicial Center. Everything went good with that, so we're in preparation for the warmer weather next week. Looks like it's gonna be in the 70s and 80s next week, so we should be set for that. That's all I have for updates.
Any questions? I did walk through that puddle
Did you?
for the crane count. I saw a muskrat, but I didn't see the beavers. So. And no cranes. Does anyone have any questions about the financials or anything? All right, thank you.
I just have a comment about the cranes.
It's not on our agenda.
Well, if you want to count cranes, you can come to my
Oh,
house.
okay, all right, next year. Anyone have questions about the Menominee Rifle and Pistol Club report? We don't have anyone to answer them, but, or,
I want
Right.
to bounce back. Cranes
Okay.
are at my place also.
oh, no.
But to Deb and Scott, I happened to pull into the rec park on April 15th, the day that the second solar project was having their informational meeting, and county crew of 3 were busy working on the bleachers.
Yes, we did get the bleachers.
So I don't know, maybe it was mentioned, but anyway, it's it's a really good thing. And I drove in there and I said, it looks like you guys are working hard. And he says, yes, we are. And I says, I'll tell Scott when I see him. Scott, they were working hard.
Good.
So that's been a big deal for the horse project. So somebody asked me about slivers in my butt, but I didn't say anything about that.
All right, so we'll move on to number 7. Um, so did we get paperwork about the rescindment or?
Yeah, so it's not included in your packet. And we went over kind of how the best way to kind of go about this, but yeah, so we did receive a notice from Workhorse Development that they were not going to be able to purchase the property uh, that we had a purchase agreement for. They had noted that they, you know, maybe if the county were willing to pretty much give away the land, but they knew that that wasn't the thing, so they just requested to end that. So we received a document to accept their rescindment, and the process we are choosing to do is to just have the facilities committee approve that, and then we would go forward with that. Ultimately, as part of the agreement, it was within their rights to choose to do that, but we wanted to make sure that we had it on the minutes somewhere so that we, 15 years from now, when somebody finds that we sold the land and doesn't figure out why we still own it, there's a record in the public record. So, so that's what we have here. So
So this doesn't go any
it's,
further?
yeah, it's not going to go to the full board. It's just going to stay here.
So would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll move to accept the rescindment of the Workhorse
I'll second it.
House development land?
Development Land Purchase Agreement.
All right, and then, so that was Barbara Lyon,
Mhm.
and then
I'll second.
seconded by Larry Bjork. Any discussion?
Yep, I do.
Okay.
Dan,
Mhm.
have you ever seen anything like this before?
I think it's normal. I think we're actually in a good place that it wasn't to the point that they bought the land and then never moved forward with the development. So we still have that land in our control to be able to do that. I think that was one of the risks that was pointed out, is, you know, if things were to happen, they could just stop development. So I would say that that's probably a good thing that that happened. Just from the timing of how things happened, I believe it is somewhat related to the market
Mhm.
kind of instability that they weren't willing to kind of go out on that limb. So
Well, I remember their request, and presentation to do it. And the one thing that stuck out in my mind through the whole thing was, uh, yeah, we're willing to build, but it kind of sounded like they wanted to have the building, have agreements for tenants to move into the building, right off the bat. So, I mean, is there, an educational or something site that workhouse development goes to and says, we're interested in Menominee, Wisconsin, and are you interested in being part of, living in our development? And um, well, that was the one thing. And then the other thing was, I always kind of wondered on where the dollar amount came from. And do uh, developers look at property and then go to an assessor's valuation? Or how did they come up with the amount that they thought they could spend? Would you guess?
yeah. So I'll answer your first question first. So yes, there is a somewhat brokerage firm where they can just go in and say, all right, I'm looking for, you know, these types of retail spaces, and there's people that kind of have, you know, connections to a lot of like the franchise, bigger franchises and things like that to be able to fill that out. So likely what happened was after they received that purchase agreement, so that they had essentially they were able to go to this group and say, we have this land. So is anybody interested in it? And that's when I'm pure speculation. That's where that group might have come back with, well, we're not sure, or, you know, it would cost this much. I'm not sure, whatever they had said. And I think that's what kind of brought it down. As far as the price for that land, that was an assessment, an appraisal, sorry. I knew I was gonna do the wrong one too. That was an appraisal that we paid for and asked. So they paid the price that we identified.
Okay, so they did not research the price. We researched the price.
I'm sure they did research the price, but but we set the value at what we felt was correct and they agreed.
You know, over the last 2 weeks, I've had people speak to me about Dunn County and how come we seem to be interested in only housing development, and we don't seem to want to get out there and find places for people to work in these housing developments. And of course, both people mentioned Chippewa County. And if you drive, I go to the Oak Leaf Clinic over there. It's a third exit. I think it's Seymour Cray Drive, and you cross the Chippewa River and you get in there, and you just can't believe the new buildings and construction and opportunities for jobs that they are there. And so both people says, well, we can get a job in Chippewa County or something. And I said, and I had to tell them, I said, we have really fallen down on economic development stuff in the past, but I think we're as good as we've ever been now that I can remember. And our partnership, you know, with Stout and Acola, is that how you say his name? I says, you know, we got a guy out there beating the bush we're, you know, I think we're gonna see some success. But both people mentioned housing and both people mentioned Chippewa County. So,
So I can add a little bit to that. And part of the challenge that Adam Akala is working through is businesses don't want to come here because there isn't places for people to live, to work there. So it's definitely a chicken and egg type
been hearing that
question. So yeah. So I think that is, it's a chicken and egg, and I think that's where Adam's approach is, let's work on both. So.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay, well, that's what's hits my ear.
Yep.
Any other discussion? So we have a resolution to accept the Workforce Development Land Purchase Agreement rescindment on the floor. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, so that passes unanimously. So then our big discussion, the consideration of reports, resolutions, and ordinances. So it's the Verigy contract. And so, does anyone have any clarifying questions first, right? So, instance.
So yeah, so in this instance, as its agenda, it's agended to approve the contract. The recommendation that you have from us would be to not approve that. So from a motion standpoint, you could make the motion to approve, or you could make the motion to accept the recommendation from staff, which is to not.
To deny, to deny approval.
Yep, yep. So,
So
I'll move that we.
microphone.
Yeah, I move we deny the Verigy contract.
Supervisor Prochnow first, and then Supervisor Bjork seconds. So now we have discussion All right, Supervisor Bjork.
Believe it or not, I live with a person that's smarter than me at home. And she goes through stacks of papers all the time. And in her business, she's a lawyer, that they hate fluff. They like stuff written, so you get to the point, you ask the question, and you move forward. And she said, whoever wrote up the report that we got from Dan did a heck of a good job. So who's gonna take credit for that?
I wrote my name on it.
Okay, well, you did a good
Right.
job
Right.
from someone that knows a good job when she sees it. So.
I
great.
even
Thank you.
overruled AI. I didn't like its version.
Yeah, it's really good. It was a really, well,
Mm-hmm.
it was a really good
Yeah.
job. I mean, the numbers were,
Page and a half or 2 pages,
Yep.
and you got stuff needed, recommendation.
Mhm.
Let's move on.
Yep.
Because I find that people that often do not give you all the facts, bury it in a stack of paper. And I'm not gonna say that the proposal from Virgie was a stack of paper, but it was hard to know what's what.
Mhm.
Thanks, Dan. Good job.
So part of it came down to additional costs for the geothermal that was unexpected, right? To replace pipes. And so they changed the scope on us. So they changed the scope on us from solar for all the buildings to just just for the judicial, which didn't result in savings.
Yeah.
From energy that we expected.
Yeah, so if you remember, I know it had been talked about in a few of these meetings that they felt they could replace their HVAC system without replacing all of the pipes. After their evaluation, they found that they did need to replace all of the pipes. So as that increases the total cost of the project, and we kind of had a ceiling for them, they had to start cutting things, and then they cut out the solar. And solar is one of the big savings components of that. We already knew the geothermal system wasn't going to pay for itself over 20 years. The intent was that the solar would kind of make up for that. So by adding in the pipes, they had to take out the solar, so they got less savings and still at the same price. And that's kind of what compromised the savings a little bit there. Uh, I would add a little bit to that, and as I kind of got into the percentage of risk that we were taking on, I think it was intended that, I think we always knew, the federal government controlled whether we got the money back, but all of the work to do that was going to fall back on the county as well. So you really got into, how much are we getting out of allowing you essentially kind of free rein on that project, or what amounted to about 31% of the risk. And if we're taking on 70% of the risk, we should have more control over that project is kind of where my thought process was. And I think circles back to Supervisor Bjork day one saying that. So
Now, are we gonna owe Vergy any money because of all the work they did do? And is any of that work transferable to putting this out for bids for general things for the HVAC system, or where's all that stand?
So there was a letter of intent that we had signed that puts us on the hook for a little bit. We're working with them to figure out exactly what that is. I think if you go through that, it's on like page 87 or something like that. It does kind of go through those costs. So I mean, it does get us in a good place if we were to put that HVAC system up for bid to kind of have a feel for what needs to be done and how much that would cost. So there's certainly value. I know as we talk like in the highway project about doing that design and going through that, I think we kind of did that design thing. So there's some I would argue there is some value in what we got out of that. And we know a lot of the numbers, as we talk about solar, we know that if we were to put, this big of a solar thing in here, that's kind of the amount of savings. Yeah, I mean, if you just do the simple math, you can see that the solar pays for itself, without the incentive, in just that one building. So you can kind of extrapolate that out to additional buildings and thoughts. So certainly value in the numbers that we got.
Sorry, forgot I was still on. I do have got a question. So do you think that in a future bid that things like where the solar field would be located is still like a viable place? And so we kind of have an idea of things like that, where it can go and how it could happen. What about the HVAC system? Do you think that we would be still looking at a geothermal system?
So that'll be something I think this committee is going to have to decide.
That's
I think as you go in the future, if we were to go to a bid to say we just want to replace the HVAC system and people could choose between the two, the geothermal is always going to cost more upfront, but has a better return. So yeah, you'd have to find a way to put that up for a bid that kind of takes those two into account, or you just choose one way or the other in order to do that. So a little foreshadowing into what you might see in the future at this
because
committee.
the HVAC, we know that the HVAC system has to be replaced. So what's our timeline on that as far as how soon?
Before it fails.
Well,
Do we have an idea of how we Band-Aided it together?
Yes, I would agree before it fails. There are some parts of the system that are obsolete. Some of the parts and pieces, we've been able to get some of the parts, but just from HVAC companies, they're not available. So we've got it going along, knock on wood, it worked well over the winter. We got the chiller started up, that's going good now. It was, probably 4 years ago, we put quite a bit of money into the chiller, so that part of it's been rebuilt. But I think the big thing to remember with a geothermal system, putting it into a building that is occupied, you run into the problem of getting everything installed into that place with offices there. And along with that is you have to figure out your point of transfer over, switching from one system to another. It's going to affect, if you're doing the work in the summertime, it's going to affect your air conditioning greatly. So that was one of the things I think they ran into with putting in new piping, was that it would be easier to install all the new piping so that the geo loop would all be in the building. And then you could start installing all of your heat pumps and get that part in there. Then you could get that hooked up and ready to go. And then you can shut down your chiller and start demoing that, because then you could have your geo system up and running to have that air conditioning. So it's kind of the transition is a kind of a tricky thing. And I think originally they thought they would be able to use the original piping, and once they got into it more, it was more like they had to put in new piping and got to be more expensive.
So we would need to put that probably in next year's capital improvement plan.
Yeah. So this obviously was fresh. We wanted to get this kind of taken care of as we move forward to the next steps. The board hasn't approved the capital improvement plan for 2026. We just had the workshop, so we may kind of reworkshop some of that and think about that. I shared this with Dustin. He was like, "Oh, where's my highway building?" So, So yeah, I think we have some kind of work to do in the background to think about the right plan, but certainly I think from everyone I've talked to, I think the HVAC system in the judicial center needs to be the priority. It's the greatest risk.
Yeah. And one of the approaches to it that would be an option would be doing it in phases. If you could do it in phases, it would be worthwhile. You could do the work there. You could get stuff installed and get things in place and work at it. One of the big things right now that is a problem is the controls. That's the obsolete parts. The controls, and there's electronic over pneumatic controls. And so you've got air controls. There's a lot of issues. That's old school controls. And then your building management system is really outdated. And those things, you get those in there and gear everything that you're putting into it toward a geothermal system, if that's the route we want to go, and then do it in phases. That'd probably be one of the easier, less disruptive ways of doing it.
And there isn't a performance-based funding is only if you go through someone else. You can't like fund yourself.
So we can completely fund it ourselves. So the performance base, the big thing that we were getting out of that was the guarantee. And by following the statutory rules of that, it essentially removes the low bidder requirements because they're taking on a level of that risk. So we can certainly look at that and say, it's really about how we allocate the funds. So if you put something in there that saves our energy costs, we already budget our energy costs. It's just a matter of how do you repurpose that savings? Do you repurpose that savings and put it into building roads? Or do you repurpose that savings and put it into paying the debt service? So it's really just how you use that savings.
All right.
So we can certainly do that. It's just our own money without guarantees.
But it would still hit the levy going through the debt.
It
Like,
it wouldn't have to necessarily hit it's hard to guarantee that it won't because you're talking about the savings. So we expect it to save $100,000. So we're going to build our debt service. So our annual debt service on this is going to be $100,000 this year, $105,000 the next year, $110,000 the next year, and so on and so forth. If you don't actually realize that savings, then it hits well, it wouldn't necessarily hit the debt levy, it would hit the general fund. So to be able to cover that. So that's kind of where it is. It's just that there's not a guarantee. But if you have good, safe numbers, you can do a good job of not having an impact that. But not one I would stand in front of and say, this will not affect the.
Right.
So,
okay, just keeping that in mind. All right, any other? Okay, Supervisor Brewer.
Two things. Number one, I thought at one time that we talked about that $11 million was already in the budget for the project that we're not doing. Maybe or may not be, I don't know. But then the other thing that I'd like to your consideration on is that I truly understand the wants and desires to be somewhat energy independent and the wants and desires to no longer relying on fossil fuels for energy. And I can understand that. But since we started this, and you go look at Burgie's thing, it goes back probably in December, and they got the building down on Wilson Street on their proposal and who they're dealing with. So then it seemed like they knew us very well. But at the at the April 15th meeting at the rec park in the Finetti room was representatives of the second solar project that involved probably 6 or 8 different farmers that I individually, every one of them I knew. And it's it's where their location is to the big 340 transmission line. Now, the 340 transmission line, I have 3 towers on my farm. So I'm right in the middle of it. On one side to the west is uh, about 3,000 acres, little plus 38 something. And to the east towards Eau Claire with the initial project with Dunn is over 2,000 acres. So there is 5,000 acres of solar panels producing electricity. So I'm asking these guys, I says, Dunn County is trying to decide whether they want to be in the energy business and produce their own solar energy. And I said to them, I says, you're putting 6,000 acres of solar panels in Dunn County within 5 miles of where it's needed at the government center. I says, won't those 5,000, 6,000 acres bring electricity towards Menominee? Or is electricity, the two substations for putting them up are both to the east? One's on Old County Trunk E, and the other one is on the intersection by Mud Creek Bridge. And the guy, I said to him, I says, is electricity directional? So you gather all this solar energy and you throw it in the big line. Now, does it have to go where? He says, electricity doesn't go one way or the other. Electricity builds up, and as it's used, it's funneled off. So I don't see why we can't say that, more and more of the energy that we use here in Dunn County is provided by NSP, which gets what percentage from solar or what it's going to be down the road. Why do we need to duplicate what's already here? Now, if you want to do it because it makes you feel good, some guys get really excited when they get a 12-point buck on the wall. Other people get excited when they see solar panels out beside the school. It's all how you feel about it, as far as I'm concerned. But if you want energy that is not necessarily provided by burning fossil fuels, they're shutting down the coal plant in Stillwater and proposed to even take the stack down. And that's 600 megawatts. And these two projects here are each over 300. So coal is going away. It's probably, they tell me that it's going to go to China to fuel their coal plants. But I just look at it like if you add another operation, and it might happen to be a solar field, that's an operation. That's a facility's job for Scott to maintain and everything. So as we look down the road, I would just wish that we would consider that we have an abundance of solar energy in Dunn County without having to provide our own. That's all I got. Thank you.
What if that energy becomes free to us, so we save the taxpayers money because,
Free energy?
well, it's down the line if we pay it off, and so then, I mean,
But if you want to think that way, it's okay with me. I don't know. Well, the thing is, I was a dairy farmer and I sold
your microphone,
eight I was a dairy farmer and I sold 1,800 pounds of milk every other day. And we used to get our milk for the family right from the bulk tank and took it to the house, and there was our milk. Now, did I think that that milk was free? No, it wasn't. I had to cool it. I had to have the structure, feed those cows. I had to haul away their manure, which I've been doing the last 2 days steady.
So you
Each
would have
house.
rather bought it from your neighbor.
Pardon me?
So you would have rather buy it from your neighbor
No, I'm just
instead of
making,
generating, making, maybe? I don't know.
I
But that's
buy it,
not our
I buy it
point.
from my neighbor now. I go to Quick Trip and I buy it from my neighbor now.
Okay.
But it's not, it was never free to me.
Right. So we have any other discussion about
It's
the
Just,
resolution?
okay, so going forward, I don't know, can we talk about that or not, but are we, for next meeting, are we gonna talk about putting this out for bids and how we're gonna do that, or?
So, um, we can certainly get to that. So you had brought up, so the money is budgeted with the purpose. It's based on borrowing for that. And so realistically, there is budget to do that this year. I think my thought was that we would probably hold up and target to try and get a project to go next summer window, so we can kind of sit back and think about the best approaches, especially as we've already had this conversation about the highway building and all of that. It all impacts that whole borrowing concept. I think direction of where you want to go is probably something important for the next meeting, but my thought wasn't necessarily to try and get a bid and get it done
Okay.
this year.
That's what, I just wondered, because I mean, I think it's important to kind of figure out if we're gonna get some bids with geo versus non-geo, this energy savings with the geo versus non-geo and all that stuff. And when we can discuss that, but I was just thinking next meeting or whenever you guys put it on the agenda, but
Yeah.
that's kind of the plan in general.
Yeah,
Okay, that's good
yeah.
enough.
As
Perfect.
we would move forward a process to probably try and do bidding over the, like the winter months or early.
Okay.
Or early here and plan to get something the next year. And we have to get through the whole figuring out how to borrow in 2026, because it's either doing something with the highway or it's increasing the levy. Those are kind of the options there. So.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of curious. So their number of this 9.24, is that kind of what it would be just to do have that system in there? Traditionally, or some other?
So the traditional system was about 8.
Okay.
I can't remember the exact number that because they did have a traditional system kind of built in.
Okay.
And that was kind of how they showed the savings, was the difference between the two, and including the total cost of ownership, as Supervisor Bjork was referring to. The work that you have to do to keep all of these things going doesn't really go away. So those are the numbers that they had for those systems. Once again, that's not a low bid
No,
contract.
No, right.
So,
It's,
yeah.
it's a number you can work from.
Mhm.
But I mean,
Yeah.
I want to put it out for bids, but I mean, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
at least we have a rough estimate of what, that would be
Yeah.
just a traditional.
Yeah, I want to look into those numbers a little bit,
Yeah.
because the initial quote when we had talked with Verigy was around 4 million. So now we get into the pipes and how does the pipes come in? And
Okay.
I don't want to say that I'm questioning their work, because they know it more than I do.
No, yeah.
But I think the other thing to look at there is, as they were guaranteeing, they're going to protect themselves,
Exactly.
as they should.
Exactly.
So I do think that that's probably on the high end of a
Right.
number if we were to go to a bid.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right. So we have a motion on the floor to not approve the Verigy contract. Any further discussion? All right, so we'll call the question. All those in favor of not approving the contract, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so the motion passes. So our next meeting is May 28th at 5 p.m. So thank you all. We will adjourn.